Hi guys, on this tutorial I'm going to be talking about dropshipping taxes in Canada, EU and the US. So even if you don't live in these countries, for example, you live in Dubai but you're dropshipping, you're selling to customers in the US, Canada and EU, you definitely need to understand the tax situation there so you could stay compliant. And even if you already live in the US, you already live in Canada, you already live in the EU, you still need to understand the tax situation for e-commerce businesses to stay compliant. All right, let's get right into it. For disclaimer, I am a lawyer. I have an LLB degree. However, I am not a US practicing attorney or a Canada practicing attorney, so this tutorial does not serve as legal advice. If you want legal advice, you should definitely contact practicing attorneys in those countries. I'm only doing this tutorial from my own knowledge and from my own experience, and it's mainly just for educational purposes. All right, good. So when you're drop shipping, right, you're supposed to pay something called company income tax. So let's talk about company income tax. Now, if you're drop shipping and, for example, you live in Sweden, you're supposed to pay company income tax to Sweden government if you're a registered company. But if you're not a registered company, you're just a sole proprietor, you're supposed to pay personal income tax to Sweden government. Now, when you're now drop shipping to the US and to Canada, you're also supposed to pay income tax to US and Canada, but that will not be the case because of an exemption called the double tax treaty exemption. Now, US and Canada and even the EU does have double tax exemption treaty with a lot of countries. I'll link to web pages where they listed this country, so you just check. Once your country where you live or where your business is registered has a double tax exemption treaty, then you only pay to the country where you live. So if you live in Sweden, you only pay to Sweden. If your business is registered in Sweden, you only pay to Sweden, and you don't pay to the US and Canada because of the double tax exemption treaty. Once you verify that your country where your business registered has that double tax exemption treaty with the US and with the US, Canada, or wherever you're dropshipping. Now, to claim that double tax exemption treaty in the US, you need to fill out and submit something called a W-8 form, which you can do online. I'll also link to the IRS webpage with the form so you know what it looks like. For company income tax, it's usually charged by the country where your business is registered or where you need to pay company income tax to. So in the US, it's a flat 30% rate. So just know that company income tax or personal income tax, if you're sole proprietor, is only to be paid to the country where your business is registered or where you live as a sole proprietor. Okay, if you're dropshipping in the US, Canada, and EU, you should be paying company income tax, but that won't be the case if you're a benefactor of the double tax exemption treaty. Now, tax ID is just a normal tax ID. So if you live in Sweden, you could get tax ID from your local tax authority there. And if you're a company already in Sweden, then you'd have your company tax ID. And even if you're dropshipping in the US, Canada, and EU, you could still use the same tax ID. And that applies to whatever country your business is registered. So if your business is registered, for example, in Ghana, the same thing. Your tax ID in Ghana is your business tax ID and you could use it. All right, good. So for sales tax, right, you're supposed to pay something called sales tax. Now, we've talked about income tax. Another thing to talk about is sales tax. So for sales tax, you pay sales tax to the country where you are drop shipping. So unlike income tax that you pay to the country where your business is registered, for sales tax, you pay to the country where you are drop shipping. So if you're drop shipping in the US, Canada, you pay sales tax to that country, but there is a threshold. There is a threshold, so you don't just start paying sales tax the minute you start dropshipping. No, in the US, the threshold you have to meet in sales is determined by different states, depending on the state where you're selling to in the US. And in Canada, the threshold is 30,000 Canadian dollars, and in the EU, the threshold is 10,000 euros. So you need to have made sales up to that volume to start charging and remitting sales tax in the country where you're dropshipping. Now, resale tax ID is just something you apply for. So when you're buying from a wholesaler, they don't charge you sales tax because that's going to be like double taxation. So if you're buying from a wholesaler for resale, you can apply to get resale tax ID. With that, the wholesaler won't be charging you for sales tax. All right, I hope you find this tutorial helpful. Take care.